We started discussing yesterday AO1 in your agenda, which starts on page 1 and goes on for several pages. We started discussing that yesterday. We took, I haven't actually counted it up, but around 10 amendments of various significance. The most probably important ones that we've taken were where the Standing Orders Committee had ruled that we couldn't discuss AO6, which is the new constitution. Conference voted to rule that back in order so that we could discuss it, and then voted to move that up the order paper so that that will come in earlier plenaries. There were also some changes to help make sense, to extend the report to particularly around the conduct of ballots. But we do still have at least 3 amendments to be taken. And also, also there's some things that I may need to make you aware of, but I think we will start by allowing SOC to reintroduce the motion for up to 3 minutes, and then we will move on to the amendments. And we have an amendment to Rule DO3 in order, which is in the... Sorry, the amendment to DO3 back in order, and we will take that afterwards. So if the speaker for that can be... No, we won't take that one next. I've just been advised they're not here yet. We will take DO5 to be taken first, so an amendment to the order. So, Martin.
Martin Hemingway, Headingley Green Party, convener of Standing Orders Committee. I'm slightly disadvantaged. One of the deputy leaders put my papers down on the floor and knocked a glass of water over them. But I'll do as well as I can in that marine environment. I won't go into detail in reintroducing the report. It's just important to point out that acceptance of the SOC report establishes the sequence of plenaries and so on afterwards, and so until our report has been accepted, then the rest of the conference doesn't go ahead. So at some point, no matter how amended, it does have to be accepted. I wanted to begin by, in fact, proposing 2 amendments to our report, which are proofreading errors. If I introduce them, we will need to vote on these and agree them as amendments since they are in our report. On the second page of the printed report in your booklet, middle column, section E, the first paragraph says, SOC proposed the fast tracking of enabling motions EO4 and EO7. That should read EO2 and EO5. The other numbers were those on the first agenda. They just weren't changed to those from the final agenda on the final proofreading. And my thanks to Richard Firth of Leeds Green Party for drawing that to our attention. I'll deal with him later. The second one is that when you get to AO6, you will find that there is a part of an amendment there labelled 23D. We ruled 23 out of order and removed parts A, B and C, but overlooked the removal of part D. So again, what I'm asking is for conference to agree that alteration to AO6 to delete the part of 23 that we ruled out of order with the rest of it, but accidentally left in.
Martin, could you possibly give us the page number where people can find that text?
Sorry, that's...
61. Page 61.
Thank you. Okay.
In the appendix, yeah. The appendix starts at page 47. Have you finished?
Sorry?
Have you? Okay, so I think the first thing we will deal with is those two amendments. Do we need to vote on them?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the two amendments, the first one is to correct the motion numbers on page 2 of the agenda from E04 and E07 to E02 and E05. The motions themselves you'll find further down in the agenda. So are people happy? Does anybody wish to speak against that? No? Okay, right. We'll move straight to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Overwhelmingly carried. Excellent. And the other one is to rule out, is it the amendment?
Is Amendment 23D to A06, which is the first paper in the appendices on page 61, was it, Liam?
So most of that amendment was ruled out of order. They failed to rule this bit out of order, or at least failed to report that they'd ruled this bit out of order. Can we have a point of order?
Alan Borgars, North Staffordshire, Green Party. Conference, I'd like to raise a point of order. I did submit a speaker slip to rule the rest of the amendments back in order. Can that be heard, please?
We've had a brief discussion of that. If you propose moving the whole of 23 back in order, 23D will return with parts A, B and C.
Hang on, sorry. Okay, so if we rule this out of order now, to simplify things, we can rule it back in order as the whole part of the whole of Amendment 23 if we agree to move that. I know it's messy. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible so we can get on to more interesting things. So if conference is willing to accept this amendment to the report, that we rule that out of order for now, we can rule it back in order in a few minutes if we want. So all those in favour? Thank you. And those against? NEMCON. Excellent. Nobody voted against. Okay. So thank you. So we now move on to amendments. And the first amendment that we're taking is, I've lost it. This one. It's an amendment on page 2 of the printed agenda. At the top of the middle column, replace the paragraph under section D and insert motion D05 will be taken first in section D.
John Coyne, Liverpool Green Party. I'm going to ask conference to change the order of business, but only a little bit. There are 5 motions about organisation in section D of the agenda. One of them is a motion that is in name of myself and other members. It actually also was endorsed by the disciplinary committee, and therefore, had we got better organised, then SOC would have known about that and they may well have changed its priority. It's very important and also very urgent, I think, that conference hears this motion. In that section, there are other motions, all very interesting and important in their own right, but capable of lengthy debate and passionate debate, I think. We may run out of time. I think this motion will be passed quickly, and it's important because disciplinary committee lacks at the moment enough capacity to do the investigations. The motion would widen the scope so that we can invite more people to help us clear that backlog. But at the moment, you have to be a member of disciplinary committee to investigate. That rule would be replaced by this motion, and therefore I ask you to agree to hear it.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against? Does somebody up there wish to speak against? I don't think there's a microphone up there.
I'll just take this opportunity to remind members at conference that if you know that you're going to want to speak on an issue, it is extremely helpful if you can fill in a speaker slip, but also please fill it in completely. I do have one sitting in front of me. I'm not going to say who it's from. I know what they want to speak about, but they have not said if they are for or against, and they have not said if they attended the workshop. Please make sure you fill in all required elements.
You ready to
Yeah.
take this? Shara Ali, Barking, Dagenham and Havering, Green Party. Hello, conference. I think John actually put his finger on it when he said that there are other important motions in the Section D, one of which actually wasn't on the prioritisation ballot. And as we found to our cost, motions which are often tabled or fast-tracked as quick and uncontroversial quickly do become very controversial, and I think we should have the self-discipline to stick to the conference prioritisation as much as possible.
Can I comment?
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak in favour? You can have a summing up if there's a speaker for and a speaker against. Or at the end. No, okay, a quick comment.
It's the practice of Standing Orders Committee to move motions that are on the same topic together. So our assumption would be that if DO5 were moved to the top, DO4 would follow.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody else wish to speak? No, okay, so those in favour of the amendment, which is to prioritise DO5 and move that to the top of the order. Those in favour, please show your cards. Thank you. And those against? That's carried. What's the next one? Okay. Okay, so the next amendment I've got is to rule the amendment to DO3. So DO3 is a motion in your order paper. The amendment is printed in the appendix. DO3 was ruled out of order because it contradicts the motion. There's a motion to an amendment, I don't actually have the text with me, to rule it back in order. So, do I have somebody to propose that?
We have got 2 speaker slips to propose. So Richard Firth is also.
Richard?
Firth.
Okay, so for Richard Firth, is that you?
Workshop report.
Oh, right, okay, workshop report.
Adam Clark, Haringey, Green Party. The workshop was attended by 40 people. The proposer of the amendment suggested that the intention of that amendment was to make the original motion inclusive and in line with current Green Party policy and current UK discrimination law. She argued that it was not her intention to break the sense of the original motion. SOC outlined that their reason for ruling the amendment out of order was that, in SOC's opinion, the intention of the original motion lay in its mention of the Equality Act of 2010 and mention of biological sex. A speaker in favour of the a speaker against ruling the amendment back in order contended, along with SOC, that the intention was, and the significance was, in defining women's sex-based rights, as there is no current policy in this within the Green Party. SOC commented on that as a D-section organisational motion, it cannot change or introduce new policy. A speaker in favour of ruling the amendment back in order contended that, as it is written, the original motion's emphasis on biological sex is not essential to the intention of the motion as a campaign for the rights of women, and that Green Party policy, UK law and medical science support a broader definition of women than the text of the original motion. The straw poll for the workshop, those in favour of ruling the amendment back in order, 16. Those against ruling the amendment in order, 20. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the person who originally proposed it is back, so if Sian Berry would like to stand up again and come and propose that the amendment to DO3 is ruled back in order.
Thank you, Chair. Sian Berry, Camden Green Party, and thank you for your patience in letting me to speak a little bit later than I was originally intended. So my argument today is to have the amendment 00029, which has been put to motion DO3, ruled back in order. So the amendment to the SOC report would add a phrase, something. Do I have to give exact wording?
Sian, I think it'd be useful if I just point people to where the text is. They can find it on page 70, and it's in the middle column under the heading Amendments Ruled Out of Order.
Yeah, it's page 70 of the appendices. And the original motion is on page 10. Am I right about that? No, not at all. Apologies.
On page 32,
32,
the original motion.
Thank you very much. Right, so the argument I want to make is essentially one of consistency. There is, this is the amendment that you can see on the screen. The motion as it stands isn't that different to the amendment, except in the preamble part. So what we've got is preamble that talks about different aspects of women's rights, in particular language, and then a final statement of support for women's rights, asking leadership to talk about things in the terms above. And the amendment preserves the final two paragraphs and changes some of the text above in ways that may or may not change it in relation to how it relates to policy. Now, this has been ruled out of order on the grounds that it negates the original motion, but I think it does not. It doesn't remove the statement of support for women's rights. It changes some of the language used in describing it, and the amendment seeks to change it in a different way, and it doesn't actually negate the intention of the motion to do that. It only does that if you ignore or don't consider just the text that's in front of you, but you know about the wider debates that are happening in the Green Party, and you make a big assumption about what the intention of the people putting the amendment is. Technically, it doesn't negate. If you make big assumptions about their intentions, then potentially it does. Now, this is inconsistent with how the amendment to motion D02 has been treated. That's Amendment 10 on page 31. In that, you can see it's a motion about 3G, and in that you can see there's a precautionary principle stated. There's talk about the 5G network, and the people amending it have added and changed some of the preamble and maintained the overall thrust of the precautionary principle. Now, I would argue that no assumptions have been made about the intentions of the people putting the amendment to the 5G amendment, D02, and that has been ruled in order quite rightly, because
Can
that's
you wind
not the
up,
job
please,
of SOC. Whereas for DO3, assumptions have been made, and therefore it's been ruled out of order. And these two amendments, which both
Sian, you've had more than 3 minutes. Please, can you wind up?
Are the same kind of amendment and should be treated consistently, and therefore this amendment should be ruled back in order.
Okay, I'm going to ask, I never know how to pronounce this, apologies, Mux Furness, please, to speak against.
Can I explain why we ruled it out of order? It's quite important.
Yes, please.
SOC don't take a view on issues. There have been various terms used about this motion. The decision we had to make under SOCC D9 subsection A was whether it negated the original motion. And that is what we had to look at. We weren't concerned with other things. In the case of the other motion referred to, the text that was inserted did not negate that motion. It extended the text of it. That is misleading. When it comes to this particular one, we had, of course, it's a novel concern. It hasn't come up previously in my time on Standing Orders Committee. But my understanding of it was that what it means by negation is to negate the intention or purpose of the original. And if we stick with the text of the original motion, motion DO3 states that it is reaffirming women's rights. And looking at it, it was a matter of determining what the context of the rights being referred to was, and that concerned the Equality Act 2010. Sections 5 to 12 of the 2010 Act list the protected characteristics under the Act: age, disability, gender reassignment, so on. Section 11 is concerned with the characteristic of sex. 11A reads, a reference to a person who has a particular protected characteristic is a reference to a man or to a woman. A simple binary in that context. The reality is, of course, much more complex. The motion proposal, however, is concerned with that binary, and its reference to women's rights in the title appears to address itself in the text, because in the text, paragraphs 2 and 5 refer to biological sex, paragraph 4 refers to sex. Amendment 29 seeks to replace the...
Martin, can you wind up, please?
Yes,
This is
seeks to reply the entire
extended.
motion with a text that removes the reference to the Equality Act 2010, removes all references to biological sex, except in the context of sex education in paragraph 7. Thank you.
Thank you. So is Mux Furness available, please?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you. I thank Martin for his contribution, which I fully support. I thank Sian for her words. However, I am profoundly disappointed a co-leader has abused their authority, wading into an already contentious and highly divisive debate, intentionally confusing the argument by addressing the motion, not the amendment. The amendment was correctly ruled out of order by SOC because it is irrelevant. It conflates sex with gender, separate protected characteristics under the 2010 Equalities Act. The motion reaffirming women's rights is clearly about adding sex-based protections to Green Party governance documents. It is not about removing gender-based protections. In simple terms, the amendment negates the motion about sex with a motion about sex and gender. It is a wrecking amendment and clearly out of order. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Richard Firth here to speak for?
Do you want a microphone there?
Richard Firth. It's on. Richard Firth, Central Outer Leeds Green Party. I supported this amendment and I do believe that it is in order. What Martin said about the reference to the Equality Act, I don't think is relevant. It makes an unproven assertion and I don't think that is grounds to rule it out of order.
Thank you, Richard. We're now going to call somebody else against the ruling this amendment back in order.
So, is Sue Green?
Good afternoon, conference. My name is Susan Green. I'm from Birmingham. The purpose of an amendment, I think we would all agree, is to try and improve a motion. Yeah? A good amendment is about improving a motion. This amendment has been thoroughly scrutinised, considered and reflected upon now by the Standing Order Committee. and rejected as not improving the original motion, but confusing it. I would ask all those here to consider this and to trust that members of SOC have diligently discharged their duty in rejecting this amendment. I would like to make people aware of an example of why sex-based rights for women are important.
You are very nearly out of time.
Okay, I shall leave it there.
Thank you. Jen Law has asked for a request for clarification.
Hi, Jen Law, Bristol Green Party. I would just like to request a clarification from Policy Development Committee. Martin from SOC has stated that the original motion had the purpose of drawing a distinction between sex and gender. But as far as I understand it, our current policy quite rightly states that trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary identities exist and are valid. And I would like clarification as to whether or not the purpose of the original motion is in conflict with our current policy.
Okay, that's not relevant to whether this is in or out of order. The discussion is purely about whether the motion is in or out of order. Sorry, the amendment is in or out of order. Right, at conference, we can continue this discussion or we can move to a vote. Do people wish to move to a vote or continue the discussion? Can we have an amendment? I think right, a very quick show. Those who wish to move to a vote, those who wish to continue the discussion, we'll move to a vote. So those in favour of the amendment to allow DO3 back onto the agenda, the amendment to DO3 back on the agenda. Those in favour? And those against? I think we'll have to count. We'll have to count. So are the counters ready? Card vote. Right, apparently we need 10 people for a card vote. Can I see 10? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, we have more than 10 hands. Okay, so that will be a card vote. Martin, would you like to explain how that happens?
So I'm trying to think about how we should actually approach the marking of the card. I think I've more or less decided. If you look in your folders, you will find at least one of these long strip cards. We will be using card A, the one at the right-hand end as you look at it. On that card, when you detach it, you will need to mark for or against. If you mark it for, you are voting in favour of the amendment being ruled back in order. If you mark it against, you are voting against the amendment being ruled back in order. Is that? And then we will circulate amongst you, collecting those, and we will then need to count the votes. I would suggest to the Chair that we don't actually hold proceedings up while that is done, but we will need volunteer tellers, and obviously we'd prefer them to be a couple of those who are voting for and a couple of those voting against, and they will go with a member of SOC down to our little hovel downstairs with a shower and toilet and tea and coffee and do the counting of the votes.
Martin, could you just mention the role of proxy votes in this?
Yes, a number of you have collected proxy votes, which means you have more than one of these strips. You will need to fill in, obviously, all of those you want the way that you want to.
Okay, Martin, another question for you. I'd like to move this on as fast as possible. I don't think we'll have the results from the ballot before we would actually like to proceed.
Before we can vote on the report, we will need the result of this.
We can't vote on the report to include the result of the ballot if we have an amendment.
But that's why I'd like to get it underway and out of the way. I appreciate we have a couple of amendments still to come.
Okay, so if people can vote as quickly as possible, if you vote, it is ballot card A on the right-hand end of this strip, clearly marked with an A. If you vote for, you are voting for the amendment to be restored. If you vote against, it is against the amendment being restored to the agenda. Is everybody clear? Okay, we will move straight on to... Sorry, the door, nobody may leave at this stage, I'm told. Can somebody please close all the doors, or several people close all the doors. People may not leave until the ballots are collected or until they're counted. Please don't set the fire alarms off. Right, okay. Right, okay, while this is going on, we have another amendment from Doug Ruxell. I will read the amendment, if I can find it again. I had it a minute ago. There it is, right. The amendment is, this is SOC, Standing Orders Committee, have proposed changing their standing orders on I've got the wrong. On page 3 of the agenda, right in the bottom right-hand corner, and he wants to delete the paragraph at the bottom of page 3 that continues onto the top of page 4. The last paragraph on page 3 that continues onto the top of page 4. Okay, Doug, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Hi, Doug Ruxell, Stafford Stone Green Party. Is it up on the board yet? Either way, the reason why I'd like to remove this, SOC are proposing a change to their standing orders. The change which they propose essentially removes any requirement for SOC to have a quorum in their meetings when they make decisions. I think that a committee that is as important as SOC, which makes a number of significant and impactful decisions right across the party, should have a quorum, and as such, I am proposing that we remove this part of their amendment to their standing orders.
Thank you. There's a large number of ballot papers in the middle block to my right, if somebody could collect those. Does anybody wish to speak against this amendment? Okay, Martin.
As one or two people have observed, there are 3 members of Standing Orders Committee at conference. There should be 5 members of Standing Order Committee making sure things happen, agreeing things between conference and so on. Straight after autumn conference, one of those who was elected at conference effectively disappeared from view. Another one disappeared from view at Christmas last year, leaving us with our 3 out of 5. What that essentially meant was that if a vote of the remaining members of SOC was 2-1, that did not allow us to make a decision. And for a couple of months, we were more or less in limbo, unable to reach a decision on a particular one. And because it was important that the ruling was got out, we took that decision. Now, I appreciate it was improper if someone wishes to ask for it to be ruled back in. That would work because we were contravening our standing orders. But because of that, we felt it was important to change the standing orders so that if the convener asked for a response by a particular time, then if a majority of those responding one way or the other reached a decision, then we could actually publish that decision. But if we lose members, and as you appreciate, there aren't very many of us, then we can be effectively incapable of carrying out our job. We'd like to do it so that on a smaller number than the full 5, we can reach a majority verdict.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak for the amendment? Anybody else wish to speak against the amendment? Okay, can we move to a vote on that, please, then? Those in favour? Right, if you're voting in favour, you're voting for the section to be deleted and it require a majority of members of SOC, not members of SOC attending. That will be the effect of supporting the amendment. If you vote against the amendment, then it's a majority of SOC members, I'm using the word loosely, attending. So those in favour of the amendment and those against, it clearly falls. I have another amendment proposed by Liam McKelland to, do I have the text? It's to have 23A, B and C and D of motion A06, which were ruled out of order. We looked at paragraph D earlier, to have all of paragraph or amendment 23 ruled back in order. Is Liam McKellan? Sorry?
No, it's against. This is the one.
Oh, sorry.
This is the one we've got 2 versions of the same thing. Right. So I think what we've got is, I think probably Alan.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's to remove rule amendment 32, I think.
Yes.
A to C, A to D now back in order.
That's on page 71.
Thank you.
And D as well.
Yes, I said A, B, C and D back in order. Alan Borgers? Right, can somebody get a mic to Alan? Yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Alan Borgars from North Staffordshire Green Party. Conference, sir. My amendment in question only seeks to amend a small section of the proposed AOC, now thankfully ruled back in order. Therefore, it does not fundamentally alter the results of the ballot, because the definition of the word fundamentally means to radically alter an amendment motion structurally, which my amendment does not seek to do. It merely seeks to make sure that the young Greens are classed as an affiliated group and bound by the same rules as other affiliated groups for the sake of fairness, and to make sure that no group in the Green Party has an unfairly granted sui generis status. This is necessary for all the Green Party's best interests, to ensure that all groups uphold the core interests and core values of the Green Party, can be fairly regulated just in case things get out of hand, and to make sure that they do not harm the Green Party or members thereof. My motion is only a small amendment to the proposed AO6, and therefore it should be ruled back in order because it does not fundamentally alter the new constitution.
Thank you. Does SOC wish to comment briefly, please?
Well, I think they're the best bits, but you know. This party agreed to go to a ballot on the terms of a new structure and constitution for the party. That ballot was completed and declared in January of this year. Amongst the things that were, it said that we should change the things that the ballot allowed and not change those things that weren't. In other words, it meant that those changes had to take place that were there, and those that weren't shouldn't. And Any decision to do either of those things would have fundamentally amended the result of the ballot and would be ruled out of order under section D8J of our standing orders. The text that was passed as part of that was that there would be on the council 5 representatives of the Young Greens. That is part of what the transition team was required to put into the new constitution by the result of the ballot. A failure to do so would be to fundamentally amend the outcome of that ballot. That ballot has force for 18 months and is the only thing we can think of that takes priority over a decision of conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Liam McClelland, who would like to speak against?
Liam McClelland, Nottingham Green Party. Conference, this amendment fundamentally changes the result of the ballot that the membership voted on as part of the Holistic Review report. The ballot voted to include Young Greens representation on the council, and this amendment seeks to subvert the result through an amendment to this motion. The Young Greens are not an affiliated group, and to remove our representation will place great stress on the representation of liberation groups as set out in the affiliated groups criteria that Conference will debate shortly. A document that myself and Anne from the Holistic Review Transition Team have worked on in communication with liberation groups, special interest groups and other Green Party groups. Conference, please support SOC and rule this motion amendment out of order.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favour? We have to, if people wish to speak, standing orders require 2 for and 2 against, which is why I'm asking if anybody else wishes to speak for or against. No? Okay, in that case we will move to the vote. All those in favour of ruling that amendment back in order, please show. And those against? Overwhelmingly defeated. Right, we have a couple more things. So there are a couple of enabling motions. These are motions that allow us to set up working groups to look at policy in a particular area, come back to conference in the future with a proper motion. But the enabling motion simply sets up the working party to review that area of policy. So there are 2 of these. EO2, which is on page 36, to look at the section on rights and responsibilities. And being a fast-track motion means that if there is a single vote against, it can't be fast-tracked and it has to go to full debate.
No, 10 votes against.
Sorry, 10 votes against. I apologise. So there's no need to ask for 4. I'm just going to ask if anybody is against fast-tracking this motion, which means basically we take it as is and set up the working group. Please show if you are against the enabling motion. No, there are none, so that is fast-tracked. And then the second one is EO5 on page 37, which is to very similar context, but it's about refugees, asylum and migration. Again, set up a working party to review our section on that. So is there anybody against that? No? Okay, so those are both fast-tracked. Then I've got an important notice here. There are elections for vacancies on various committees. I don't have a list of what the vacancies are, I'm afraid, but if you all want to get involved in the Green Party, getting onto one of the committees is a great way to do it, and you can put yourself forward. The nomination papers are available at the SOC desk outside the Ocean Room where the exhibition is, at the SOC desk. Nominations have to be in by 6 p.m. this evening. If you want more information, again, SOC members at that desk will be able to provide that. Do you have a list of what the committees are?
They're listed in the SOC report. There are 2 places on Standing Order Committee, as I've already indicated. It's a dead easy job. People enjoy it. Have we got the right thing? Oh. You can probably all read it for yourselves, but the other three committees that have got spaces on them, for committees elected at conference, 3 places on the campaigns committee, 1 place on international committee, and 3 places on the dispute resolution committee. We'll be able to give you outline information about those, but also refer you to those people who may particularly be able to give you more information. Thank you very much, Tom. And thank you.
Okay, right, conference, I'm afraid we now have a slight delay while they finish counting the ballot, because until we have the result of that ballot and know whether D23, Amendment 23 is ruled back in or not, we can't actually vote on the entire thing. I was hoping we could take it as so that it says to include the result of this vote, but I think SOC are not allowing that. Is there anybody from SOC here? We all disappeared? Are you from SOC? Sorry? Yeah, okay. Don't see why not. Let's take an emergency motion if there are any available. Okay, do we have any emergency motions available? Somebody is well prepared. Right, I'm going to ask you to, if you wish to suspend standing orders, to take an emergency motion. All those in...
He has to read the motion first, and then you...
Oh, sorry, I've got the order wrong.
Do you want me to do it? Yeah. Conference, just to outline what happens here. Emergency motions are outside of our normal process in the sense that we require motions to be proposed to be put on the member's website in advance, basically, so that people who are not here have the opportunity to read them and to think about them and to then potentially decide to come to conference to vote on it. Emergency motions, the clue's in the name, it's about something that has arisen very recently and is an emergency. Consequently, part of the process is that conference has to agree to suspend standing orders. And the process that we use is that the proposer of the motion will read the motion out. We then take a vote over whether or not to suspend standing orders. Essentially, if you think, yes, this is worth debating, you will vote to suspend standing orders. If you think, no, this is not a good use of conference's time, you vote against suspending standing orders. If the vote is to suspend standing orders, we then go into a formal proposal where you get a speech for, potentially a speech against, and then we vote on the actual motion. I hope that's clear. So, if you would like to introduce yourself and then read the text of the emergency motion.
Yep. So, I'm Samir Jaraj from Hackney Green Party. So, this motion is entitled Reinstate Dave Marito. Conference notes the summary dismissal of trade unionist David Marito this week, beginning 3rd June, by Sandwell College for writing racist on a poster for the Prevent programme. The Green Party reaffirms our opposition to the government's Prevent strategy and our commitment to supporting the rights of trade unions to take action against employers and not be victimised for speaking out. The party rejects the assertion by Sandwell College that a black member of staff writing in pen on a Prevent strategy poster that it was racist, an act which he owned up to and apologised fully for, constitutes gross misconduct on the grounds of serious damage to college property. Bringing the college into disrepute and use of inappropriate language with the consequence of summary dismissal. The party notes that since David arrived at the branch, UCU membership has risen and the branch has achieved victories on pay, extra holiday, the removal of punitive observation policy, and last year, after 5 days of strike action, achieved a sector-leading pay deal of 6.25% over 3 years. We believe that this is strengthening of workers' rights, which has primarily guided this disproportionate act of sacking David, and that this is trade union victimisation. The Green Party calls for the immediate reinstatement of David Marito by Sandwell College. Conference calls on GPEX to issue a statement in support of David, to publicise the petition and support any further protests and industrial action which may arise as a consequence of the college's actions.
Perhaps you would like to finish by inviting conference to vote to suspend standing orders.
Oh, yes. Yeah, conference, can you vote to suspend standing orders so that we can pass this thing?
Okay, so can I see those in favour of suspending standing orders and those against? Okay, no, that was overwhelmingly carried, way more than 2/3. So you have 3 minutes to speak to the motion.
So, conference, we know that Prevent is a horrifically racist policy that we know has been used against, for example, school children who were talking about eco-terrorism, or against primary school children who were drawing a cucumber and somehow it was misinterpreted as a bomb. And, you know, this is just another example of its kind of blunt use as a means to intimidate people of colour in the UK. And, you know, it's very clear what's going on, as set out by the motion, that we have a successful trade union branch within a college, a dynamic leader, and then punitively using, you know, what is frankly a really minor infraction in order to get them out of the way. And conference, if we value the rights of trade unionists, if we value the right of protest, if we value the right of people of colour to call something out as racist when it is racist, then we should support this motion and send a clear message that the Green Party is on the side of trade unionists, the Green Party is on the side of people of colour, and that the Green Party is against these kind of punitive programmes like Prevent and victimisation of trade unionists. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to speak against the motion? We can, in theory, take it in parts. Each part has to be, in effect, a self-standing motion. Is the way you wish to take it, does it make each part a self-standing motion, so that if we approve either one or the other, it makes sense? No, okay, in that case it can't be taken in parts. Okay, so does anybody wish to speak against? Oh, we've got a... Are you wishing to speak against? Are you wishing to speak against? Because you indicated first. Okay, well, we'll have a speech against.
I'm not really happy to promote the petition. I'm really sorry.
Name and party.
You need to say who you are.
Ben Samuel Barnett, Green Party. I'm not really happy to promote the petition because I've just Googled it, and it's a Socialist Workers Party recruitment webpage. So, yeah, personally, I wouldn't sign that or promote it.
Thank you. That was a speech against. Is there another speech for? Right, in the back, in the middle.
Mike Ladman, Hull and East Riding Green Party, fellow comrade of Dave Marito in the University and College Union. The petition I signed yesterday from the UCU was not anything to do with the Socialist Workers Party. It was linked straight to a website via UCU. So if that is the petition that's being used, it's incorrect. We absolutely must stand foursquare with all trade unionists on the side of right. Dave Marito is an excellent trade unionist, chair of the UCU Equality Committee, and does excellent work. This is just a punitive action by a panicking employer in Sandwell College, because he's doing such a good job there in getting good pay rises for members, and this is how they repay that. They've attacked him for no reason at all. Please support this motion.
Samir, would you be willing to amend your motion to change it to the UCU Petition.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
we'll take that as an amendment. Do we need to vote on it, or is it just a minor textual one? Okay, we don't need to vote on. We don't need to speak a speech again. We don't need to vote on the amendment. So the motion is now amended to point to the UCU petition. Is there another speaker against? Sure. Point of clarity.
Anna Hughes, Hackney Green Party. From what Samir said, it didn't seem to me that we were supporting a petition, but we were just supporting a general statement. Is that correct? So it doesn't matter if it's social worker or UCU. It's not a petition that we're supporting.
So if I remember from the text, there isn't a specific reference to a petition, but I'm sure that petitions have been circulated amongst activists, and I would commend and appoint the UCU one because, those of us that have had glorious experiences, the SWP, and their, yeah. Anyhow. Oh, the petition. Okay.
So apparently it says the petition.
Yep. Yeah.
For clarity, that will be changed to the UCU.
Yeah. The last paragraph refers to the publicise the petition. Publicise. We should now change that to publicise the UCU petition.
That's University and Colleges Union, for clarity. Does anybody else? Well, we've had 2 speeches for and 2 against. Do we wish to have? Okay, I'm corrected. We haven't had 2 speeches against. Is there another speech against? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move to the vote. A point of clarification.
Daniel Wimberley, High Peak, whatever it is, local party. At the end, you said something about supporting future action. Could you please repeat that?
So if I remember the spirit of the motion, it was that we would support, for example, if there was industrial action taken in support of David Marito.
Well, you just get
Further protests and industrial action which may arise as a consequence of this action, which I think is a reasonable thing to ask.
I'm a bit wary. Is this working? I'm a bit wary of a blank cheque. That sounds to me like a blank cheque. It needs to be limited so that we know what we're buying into.
If you want to propose a particular amendment, you may, but I don't think we can just sort of committee-wise amend this from the floor.
It's limited by virtue of trade union law and by more general law. I also will take this opportunity to commend you. I think there were some signs that have been made up. So if you want to take a picture of yourself with the support sign, then see Doug in the back. He's the guy in the red T-shirt with the hair.
Absolutely. Just a co-chair's point here. I think we have a learning point in terms of people proposing emergency motions. We need a copy of the text to SOC in advance, and we please need more than one copy of the text. So not everyone will be as willing as I am to run backwards and forwards on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Hey, I was just about to do that. So we've just been asked if we can vote. So those in favour of the motion, please show. And those against? 1 against. Okay, thank you. That is clearly carried. Right. Thank you very much for your time. No, we're moving on now. Right, the suspension of standing orders is terminated. We have the result from the ballot. And it was 251 for and 195 against. So therefore, Amendment D03 has been ruled back in order. D03 is back in the agenda. Amendment 2, D03, apologies, I keep saying it's the amendment. Right, that concludes the discussion. of AO1. We now just have to vote on whether or not to ratify it. And just before we do, I will point out, if we reject the report, then conference doesn't proceed. So it's in your hands. So those in favour of accepting report A01 from SOC. Okay, and those against? I think that's unanimous. So well done. Thank you, conference. Thank you for your indulgence and your time. I'm now handing over to Sam to chair the next part.
No,
I apologise.
It's Moira. It's Moira now.
I'm now handing over to Maura to chair the rest of this session. So you couldn't have more time. Yeah.
Good afternoon, conference. Jen is going to come and join me to chair this session, which finishes at 3 o'clock, so I think we can manage that, all of us. So in 15 minutes, we're going to sort out the Constitution. Oh, no, perhaps not. But we can get started. We'll just wait till everybody's settled down. There's somebody waving at the back? Before I've even said anything.
Sorry, this was just I failed to catch the chair at the end of the last session. David Davis, Rutland and Melton. I just wanted to kind of propose sort of thank you really to the Standing Orders Committee, because they've taken on a thankless task.
Thank you.
And, you know, I think that needs to be acknowledged, that's all.
Yeah. Thank you. That's absolutely right, and that ties in with one of the things I'm going to say. Right. My name is Moira Dunworth. I'm an unbranched member. I've been a member of this party for a long time, but I live in Edinburgh. I have been a member of SOC in this party as well, and I've been invited to chair the plenaries, which will deal with the new constitution. I want to introduce you. You have to press the button, and when the light comes on, you're good. You don't have to keep it pressed. Yeah.
Good afternoon, conference. I'm Jen Law, Bristol Green Party. I'll be co-chairing this with Moira. I am a former member of SOC in this party, but now quite happily not having that responsibility.
Right, I'm not going to go through the attunement stuff or that which has been done, because we're kind of in the middle of a session. So we have quarter of an hour, but I want to use that time, if you like, to set up what it is we're going to do. We will proceed further with this on Monday at... Okay, then I'm clearly misinformed, so never mind. At some other point, I'll be advised by SOC before we finish, when we're completing this. So I want to start the debate about the new constitution. What has happened is there has been a ballot, as you know. Various groups have worked on a document, which is a draft constitution, have submitted it to SOC. Various other people have amended it, and that document with its amendments is what we're going to discuss. Before we start that, I would like to acknowledge and ask you as conference to acknowledge that the three main parties involved in the material that we're going to discuss are the transition team, the amenders, the people who took the trouble to read it very carefully and propose amendments, and SOC, who extraordinarily kind of worked their way through all of it and all of the amendments and did all sorts of amazing things. And I want conference to, particularly speakers, to be very mindful that all of those people were volunteers and worked really, really hard to produce what we have in front of us at this conference. And I want us to be mindful of that, and I want us to be at all times respectful of those people and that process. And I will simply not tolerate anything implying any disrespect of anything, actually. Well, maybe not of anything, but you know. Thank you. I also want to remind conference that there are a number of first-timers here. Be very aware of that. So in terms of your language, let's not use shorthand or acronyms that are not explained. I would like, particularly in this kind of debate, specifically because it's about the Constitution and it's kind of nerdy and procedural, I would particularly like speakers to be mindful of the so what question. So if you're making a point about an amendment, which is mostly what it is, there is the question, so what? Like, what does it matter? So please make sure that when you're explaining stuff to conference, you answer the so what question. Okay, the procedure then is going to be that I'm going to invite the transition team to introduce the motion which we're calling A06, which is effectively the new constitution and the attendant regulations. So the transition team are going to speak to that to formally introduce it, and they have 5 minutes to do so. Then I will invite a speaker against that motion as a whole, and they will have 3 minutes. I will ask for a second speaker for, a second speaker against, they'll have 2 minutes each. Then we will move on to the amendments, because while we're going to spend most of our time talking about the amendments, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we're looking at a constitution. When all of the amendments are done, there are almost 30 of them. When they're all done, then we will again discuss the constitution as amended or not. So before I move on to that, can I have any questions of clarification about the process by which we are going to deal with this issue? Oh, okay. Smashing. In that case, can I ask for a member of the transition team to come to the stage and to explain what it is we're looking at in these plenaries and anything else of importance that they think that you should know?
Okay, thank you. I'm Martina Weitsch from York Green Party, and I'm the convener of the transition team. This is a very important issue for us to address today and tomorrow and beyond. It will enable us to move forward in the direction that the Holistic Review Commission charted in its report to the conference in Bristol last year. That direction of travel is about us being a nimble and agile party, to have our documents that set out what we do and how we do it in simple language, and to have inclusive and transparent processes. It is significant change. Change is difficult at the best of times, and change that involves constitutional questions is even more difficult. We heard earlier in conference that there are members, new ones and not so new ones, who don't feel that they are clear about what is happening with this and related motions, who probably are asking themselves, so what? I'll try and make it as simple as I can. This motion puts forward a new constitution for the Green Party that includes only those things that absolutely need the status of a constitutional document, the things we need to set a high bar for to change, the things that we do not expect to change often. A document that is simple to understand and to navigate, and a document that is a framework for other documents that govern how we do things. So that is what conference needs to address. Is this constitution able to achieve this? If you think it is, vote for it. The second thing that this motion puts forward is a set of transitional arrangements that allow us to move from where we are to where we need to be. That is part B of the motion. What this motion does not include is the content of a long list of subsidiary documents which are listed in section 19 of the draft constitution. These will come to the next conference. Why is that? There are two reasons. The first is probably not a very good reason. It's simply that the transition team and its task and finish groups have not had time to finish the work on all of those documents, principally because we did not start the work that we're doing until January, and we couldn't start earlier because the ballot hadn't finished before then. But as I said, that's not a very good reason. There is a second very good reason. We wanted to make sure that the Constitution itself was agreed so that we could ensure that the subsidiary documents matched the final agreed Constitution. If we had done this back to front, we would have had a load of amendments to things at the next conference, which would have been even more confusing. There may be questions you have, and if they come up in the debate, we will do our best to either answer them here or to take them away to incorporate the questions and answers into our work beyond this point. I want to thank the members of the Task and Finish group who have been instrumental in helping the transition team to achieve this element of our work so far. They have done sterling work and worked endless hours on a voluntary basis, and I want to thank them. I would encourage you to support this motion to help us move forward in the way the holistic review proposed, in the way that last conference agreed, and in the way that the members' ballot endorsed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just to remind you that the motion that we're discussing and amending is in Appendix A, so it's in the book that's appendices. It's Appendix A, and each time we come to discussing an amendment, I will tell you on what page it is, and I will also tell you on what page of the PDF document it is, just to kind of help you to navigate your way through. Thank you very much for that. Can I have a speaker against the motion as a whole? So, okay, right. A member at the back in an orange clothing.
Doug Ruxell, Staffanstone Green Party. I'm going to speak against this as a whole on three very specific grounds. The first of those, well, first I'm going to start by talking about, I'll ask you to think about what it is that you need out of a constitution in order to move your local party forward. There are probably three things that you really need out of a constitution in order to move your local party forward. The first of those is to think about the section about capitations, because money from the centre of the party is one of the things that is almost going to certainly help you in your local elections. The second one is that we are registered as a political party. In order to stand in elections and win elections, we need to be registered as a political party. That's quite important. The third of those things that you probably need out of it is a way of selecting and campaigning for your candidates in local elections. So there are these really, really important things that you need out of a constitution. And one of the grounds on which I think that we really need to oppose this is that this is incomplete. There are three things a political party needs to maintain a registration. One of those is a leader. One of those is an agent. The other one is a treasurer. This constitution doesn't outline how and why and where these people will be appointed. As such, this constitution will make it actually quite difficult for us to clearly identify how we're going to register as a political party. The other thing that this constitution lacks is an explicit instruction to register as a political party. Our current constitution has this. It details this very, very clearly. So on the grounds of what is really important for you in your local party to run and win in local elections, this constitution is significantly lacking. The second thing that I want to talk about is about a democratic process.
30 seconds.
We've looked at we've had a ballot of all of the members, and SOC have very clearly stated that they are of the view that this does not meet the requirements of that ballot. So to pass this would be entirely undemocratic. It would be against the will of that process. The problem is that process was very complex and it was very vague, what was actually passed by the membership. And had the Constitution itself gone, then it would be very clear the decision of the membership.
Okay, and you're finishing now.
We've been placed in a very difficult situation. This isn't the way forward for this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that contribution. I now want a speaker for the motion, and I have two speaker slips, and I would like to remind conference that it is the chair's prerogative to choose who speaks, because there are a number of matters to consider, not least diversity and such like. So I would like to ask Peter Hamilton, please, to speak for just 2 minutes maximum for the motion. And then I'll be looking for one more speaker against, and then we will then close this particular business for today.
Good afternoon, Conference. My name is Peter Hamilton from Southwark Green Party. I support the motion because we need a new constitution. We need a new constitution for the reasons that Martina outlined earlier. And I'd just like to deal very briefly with one of the points that Doug has made and ask you to reject his argument with great respect and to support the motion. And that is that it's incomplete. The Constitution, the draft Constitution before you, is a clear, short and well-structured document that provides for the way in which this party will run itself in the future. It provides for detail to be provided in the form of subsidiary documents, and the whole thing makes sense as one piece. Doug says it's incomplete because we don't say, for example, that we are a political party and we must register as such. The reason we don't, and this is the answer to the so what point, the reason we don't is that we don't have to. We are a political party. We will comply with the law. Sorry, we don't have to put it in the Constitution. We are a political party. We will comply with the law, and the law requires us to register, so we will.
Do I have another speaker against the motion as a whole? There's somebody on the left. We haven't heard from any women for a while in any debate. But, okay, that's lovely. This speaker over here, please. Maximum of 2 minutes.
I would like to speak against adopting this motion because I think it's incomplete. Sorry, my name is Ronald Stewart and I'm from Haringey Green Party. I think it's incomplete. I think this is an extremely important document for the future of the Green Party, and I think it just needs a bit more time, and there's no urgency about getting it right, and we can hear exactly the same motion at the next conference when we've had 6 months to mull it over. If you make a comparison with the policy process, which in a sense is a much less technical process, if you brought a document of this length, it would first be brought as a draft voting paper to one conference, which everybody would have the opportunity to look at and scrutinize, and we would not vote on it here. And if it was judged to be incomplete, they would stay at that stage as a draft voting paper in the following conference. So we would only decide to vote on it after 6 months after we were confident that it was complete. I have been convener of a similar working group, which was to produce rules for selecting candidates in the London region for the London Assembly and for the European elections. And
30 seconds. You're winding up.
We ensured that there was a draft available 6 months ahead of time for people to scrutinise. We brought that to 2 monthly meetings for people to give comments on before it was discussed. Thank you for your time. I do not think this is ready for prime time. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm a great stickler for finishing on time. However, I would like to ask Martin from SOC to comment on that issue, because it's a procedural thing, that issue about it, the process by which we're deciding it. Would you like to talk about the SOC position on referring this back once we're completing it? He wouldn't like to at all. Yeah, okay, but he will. because we will finish now this, but we will discuss all of the amendments, and then whether amended or not, the question is what then happens to the document, absolutely picking up the point of the last speaker. Martin.
I hadn't been forewarned I was going to be asked to do this, so I'll make it up as I go along as usual. What we were faced with was with a document that was inadequate in many ways when it came to us for review. The one criterion, the significant criterion we were measuring against was, did it fulfil the terms of the member ballot? Did it include those things the member ballot required it to do? And did it cut out those bits that were thus permitted? That member ballot said it should change the bits it was meant to change while retaining those parts of the Constitution that were not changed.
And if you could just move to the procedural bit, Martin, about what will happen and when we have finished discussing and voting on all of the amendments.
Oh.
Please. Sorry that I'm not clear, and it's not rehearsed. It's just in response to the...
Sorry, I hadn't been asked about that. Obviously, we'll be taking the amendments in turn, voting on those as such, because they are things that may or may not improve the document if they are agreed by conference. So we'll be working through the document as a working document, amendment by amendment, and amending it as we go. At the end of that procedure, we will then be faced with various options, one of which will be to agree a constitution which at that stage SOC anticipate will not fulfil the requirements of the ballot. And making that vote, it may as an alternative be referred back, which would allow that time for discussion, which was referred to by the last speaker.
Thank you. So the process is not necessarily completed at this point. Right. Thank you all very much indeed. That's the end of the discussion. Okay. Can we have... Well, I don't think you mean a point of order. All right, go on. A question, perhaps you mean.